Welcome to Mothering from Within, the podcast where we dive into the heart of parenting during those magical yet challenging first few years. I'm Kaili Ets, a mama of two, a pediatric occupational therapist, and your guide on this beautiful journey of motherhood. Every week, we explore the wonders and hurdles of motherhood with curiosity, we gain clarity around our babies, and find the courage to trust our instincts. If you are a mama who wants to do motherhood your way, confidently, courageously, authentically, then you are in the right place. So grab a cup of tea, tuck those little ones in for a nap, or bring them along for the ride. It's time to get curious, gain clarity, and unleash your courage to do motherhood your way. A gentle disclaimer, please do not consider anything discussed on this podcast by myself or any guest of the podcast to be medical advice. The information is provided for educational purposes only and does not take the place of your own medical or healthcare provider. Hello and welcome to the Mothering from Within podcast. Today, I am so excited to introduce our guest speaker. Rocio is a neuroscientist and mother of two. She is the founder of Newborn Parents, which was born out of her fusion for her two passions, the brain and the relationship between parents and their infants. She loves to educate parents and professionals about the parental brain so that they can take advantage of the profound brain changes that come along with matrescence and putrescence. And she really believes that when parents and professionals learn about the power of the parental brain, they can create a path for a lifelong nurturing relationship within families and with their babies. So welcome so much to the podcast, Rocio. It's lovely to have you here.
Hello, thank you for having me, Kaili.
So why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and sort of how you got into this whole neuroscience piece and studying the parental brain and where that all started?
Well, the neuroscience piece, that's a long time ago when I was an undergrad and I read The Brain That Changes Itself. I don't know if you know the book by Norman Deutsch. And he talked about neuroplasticity. I never heard that word before. And I was like, what? The brain can change that much? Just like with learning? And it was so fascinating to me. And I was like, that's it. I need to do something more about this than just reading a book. And I was like, oh, I can actually like study the brain. And so I decided to go into the PhD, and then I study, neuroplasticity in areas like aging, bilingualism, and things like that. At the time, I wasn't a mom yet. So I have a broad interest in the brain and neuroplasticity. But then I became a mom, and, that's like a huge change. So I was like, what is happening in my brain? Right. And so it was a gradual like awakening and interest into what's going on in this part of this research area. So I started to learn more about brain development and parental brain, but always just being in the lab doing research, not in parental brain per se. I was just interested in that. Then I became a mom again, and it's like starting to think, oh, well, like this is so interesting. And then moms also in the lab and my friends just kept asking me questions too, because they know I really like that area. So I found myself like talking to them about that and like spreading information. I was like, could this be a job? And so, yeah, I decided just to change trajectories. And now I like to communicate this science to parents and professionals and support parents, always applying this science.
I love it. I love that so much. And I find often that our journeys into our work with moms and babies and young families, often that comes from our own experiences and the need that we see when we go through our own motherhood journey. And then we want to kind of impart that knowledge to help others, which is amazing. And that's how we all grow, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So let's just dive right in and start talking about the parental brain. So I would love if you could tell us some of the ways that the parent brain changes when you have a baby.
Yeah. So there is a huge capacity for learning when we become parents. So that means that our brains acquire these new neuroplasticity, like, is major, right? So the last time you had something like this capacity was like during adolescence. And so the next time, the next stage is, if we become parents, is during this stage. And it starts already changing during pregnancy for women, particularly in areas associated with the empathy network, which I find fascinating, right? Because when you think about it, well, guess what? You really have to start putting yourself in the shoes of somebody else that doesn't talk, has a different way of communicating. There's non-verbal. And so we had to learn so much, right? So changes start already during pregnancy. And then when we have a baby too, there are different networks. So there is the parental caregiving network, which is the big network in our brain that becomes activated. And then in there's like the motivation and reward network, so it's very rewarding to be with our babies. Or tell me, like, what does it feel like to smell your newborn's head, right?
Yeah.
So it's like,
I love that.
yeah,
I know.
you can't really describe
And
it.
that's by design too, right? Like I think that's evolutionary so that you do fall in love and have these brain changes so that you can take care of this tiny little being.
Absolutely is evolutionary. Like, we wouldn't be here without that work, because taking care of a baby is really like a newborn. You're putting all your needs like second. You don't sleep, you have to, you produce milk, you're feeding this baby. And so it has to be feel good for us, right? It has to be addictive.
Otherwise, you would never have more than one.
That too, we keep doing it again. So it's like there must be something to it, right?
Yeah.
So there you go. Is the motivation and reward network is the same circuitries involved that when we fall in love, and with drugs too. Like, it is the same network. The only difference, like, the stimulus is the baby. That's the target stimulus. So that becomes a wire. Then there's also the vigilance network, and you hear particularly with the first baby, I'm so alert, like everything, like I'm like, don't like this, so that's your vigilance network becoming activated. Then there's also the emotion regulation network that becomes very malleable, because we had to co-regulate our babies with our mature nervous system. We had to have that capacity. I mean, it's not easy, obviously, and there's moments where we lose it, and, like, we're vulnerable also to mental health issues. But that's the network that is there for us and that is capable of enormous rewiring. And then the empathy network, as I said.
And so, why is it important for parents to know about these changes in their parental brain? Because I can just attest to the fact that I remember with my first, I mean, some of these changes, I wasn't necessarily conscious of them, but I was kind of annoyed by the fact that I would hear like the phantom cry, even though my baby wasn't crying, only to have them cry like a few seconds later. But it was like that maternal instinct piece too, where my brain was just like so wired to my baby. And my husband thought I was crazy. But why is it important for parents to just be aware of the changes in their parental brain?
Because I think it helps to normalize a lot of what we're feeling, and we make sense of our experience. So, and then we also gain more confidence when we know, that the main goal of this network is to provide sensitive care to an infant. We're more impermeable to myths out there that we know there are many, right, Kylie? Like, we work in
Yep,
space.
there's so many.
There are so many. This is why we are here and we're so passionate about this, right? Because there are so many myths that I just want to pull my hair when I hear them. And so I really believe that having this knowledge can really be like, okay, no, that's bullshit. That's like not true. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever with what we know about how my brain should work. So that's one thing. And then to know that you have that enormous neuroplastic capacity, that enormous learning capacity, gives you also hope, and that this is a learning experience, that you're not failing at something if you don't get it right away. I mean, you're going to fail so many times all throughout their life for our children, right? Like, I mean, it's a constant learning experience, and just to know that we're always here to learn for each stage. And then there's no perfect parenting, but our brain is there with that capacity for repair and for learning. And also then, like the emotion regulation network becomes plastic. And so it's also a good time to heal wounds if we have like childhood wounds, and like to rewire our nervous system again. And I mean, we can always do that, but I really think that during parenthood is a perfect time to do it because of the neuroplasticity that we have, right? So we can do all of these things and with a more power, so to say.
Yeah, and that's so interesting because I do feel like a lot of us have some, generational patterns and childhood experiences that we don't want to repeat, right? And so I think that having our own children is a way for us to not necessarily redo, but heal, exactly, heal some of that. So I love that our brain actually is in such a moldable state when we have our babies and young children that we can heal that, which is awesome. So I have a question about this parental brain. So we know that it starts to become more plastic with your first baby, which is amazing because we all go through a huge learning curve when we have a baby. And then, babies don't come with an instruction manual. And I had another guest on the podcast who likened it to you are just as old as your first baby in terms of being a mom, in terms of being a parent. And when you start a new job, you don't expect to have all the pieces right away. It's a big learning curve for your job, and you get mentorship and support and time and all of the things. And I think that's something that we don't necessarily consciously think of for us as parents. Like we just think we have to have it all figured out on day one. My question is, when we have our second baby or our third baby, does that brain continue then to have those big changes of more plasticity with each child? Or is it just like that first kind of baby experience that your brain is plastic, and does that last for a while? Or any thoughts on that? That might be a very deep question.
Yeah, I don't think this has not been studied in detail yet. So I don't think I can answer the
Mm-hmm.
question of like how much more plastic is for the second baby. That would make an interesting study. I do think there is like a couple of studies looking at like those moms that have like two kids, and there were differences in the brain activation. I can't remember exactly, but it was like their emotion regulation network was either more activated with the second or like less. I don't remember, but there were differences, and it's like it's time dependent too, and like how and the number of kids also play a role in like the wiring of this network. And like by experience, and you tell me too, Kaili, I do feel that my brain is more wired, is more experienced, and can deal with challenges more easily with the second. There are other challenges because then you have two, right? And it's like they're dynamics.
True.
But in terms of like when my second was a baby, I felt much more confident and much more like, don't come here with your bullshit. I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, exactly. And I definitely felt that way too. And I kind of tell all my first time moms that, don't worry, it does get easier. And by, second baby, you're not going to worry about all the noises that your baby is making, and,
Exactly.
where they're sleeping and all the things.
Yeah,
Um,
and that many moms
so
tell me the same thing too.
yeah, yeah. And I think that also just comes because we have had that learning curve. And I love to think about it how, like that our brain is actually changing. And it's almost like I feel like my brain has gotten less anxious and more relaxed and more able to kind of go with the flow and just kind of be, instead of feel like I need to do all the time with my second versus my first.
Yeah. I find our experiences are so similar, and also since you remember, I mentioned the vigilance network when with our first newborn, like
Mhm.
so alert, and it's like so many moms tell me the second time it's like they're way more chill and way less anxious about this, about whether their newborn is doing well, what is that noise, and for me too, it was
Mm.
like that. So, and I hear this all the time. So, yeah, it needs to be studied more, but definitely so many experiences sound similar.
If you are ready to take a courageous step towards doing motherhood your way, the Mothering from Within Collective is waiting with open arms to help you get curious about your parenting values, tune into your mama instincts, gain clarity about baby sleep, development, reflux, and more so that you can be the confident supermom you have always dreamed of. Visit the link in the show notes to learn more about the collective and how we can walk this beautiful path together. Yeah, amazing. And so my next question is also, I wonder about those parents who have those babies that are quote unquote more fussy, who, perhaps are labeled with colic or they have lots of reflux and they're crying a lot of the day. And parents are feeling like they're doing everything and they just can't quote unquote fix their baby. Has there been any studies or what are your thoughts on what goes on in the parental brain there? And does the parental brain, does it have the ability to kind of take over and try to mitigate some of that stress that parents are feeling? Or is it kind of, wiring the neurons, how the neurons that fire together wire together, if we're always stressed, does that increase our anxiety later on in life? Or any thoughts on that?
Oh my goodness, your questions are so good, and like studies like to be conducted. I do know there is a study. This is not like related to it, like it's not about colicky babies, but the moms. There was a study looking at how long somebody tried to calm a doll baby, and there were moms tried more to co-regulate, like try to calm this doll baby more than the non-parents. So there is definitely something there, that the parents is like, I got this, I know how to do this, I'm trying to do this. Now I don't know, like if you have a colicky baby that will make you more anxious. I do think that it could go that way, but I really think it comes down to having the right support and having the right tools to fine tune your emotion regulation network, because that's very stressful. But with the right support and the right tools, I think we can cope and fine tune our emotion regulation network and be there for our baby with the presence that they need. And sometimes there's nothing we can do, and all we can give is our calm presence. And so, yeah, it comes down to really the tools and the support we have in those the very difficult the stages. Yeah.
And so maybe let's talk a little bit about some of those tools, if you have any ideas for us in terms of how parents can kind of support themselves also during all of these brain changes, but supporting their nervous system and their sort of that, that emotional regulation system, and maybe even that vigilance system that kind of comes online a little bit more. Are there any tools that parents can kind of put into their day when they're starting to feel overwhelmed or when they're, getting anxious thoughts or whatnot? Do you have any special ones to share with us?
Yeah, well, there's not gonna be anything new here that I'm gonna tell you. It really is the same tools that we need when we're stressed, right? So the big one is breathing, right? I find that one the most. Even now for this, I do breathing because speaking in public, people are gonna listen. So breathing is everything, right? When we practice every day, like it really does make a huge difference because it's like a bottom up approach. It's like you are breathing and then you calm your mind like that. It's like bottom up from the senses up. So I highly recommend that for our parents to do it. Like, and I know it's hard to find moments, but it could be micro moments. It's like even starting with 3 minutes. There are free apps out there, and it can be so useful. And I'm a fan of trying all the bottom up things that you like anything through the senses, because you're not necessarily engaging your prefrontal cortex, trying to like journaling or those are recommended too. But I really like the ones that are fun. You can dance, you can move, and then the result is that you're calmer, right? Like walking, being in nature, all of those things. So those are bottom up, and then the top down also help, like the journaling.
Yeah, I love that. And I think we sometimes forget that breathing and walking in nature and movement like dance parties is a great way to regulate our nervous system. But also that is like self-care. I know self-care has become this like catch-all phrase and people think, oh my God, I don't have time for self-care. And it's this should that you need to be doing on a daily basis. But even walking outside with your baby in a carrier, in the stroller, whatever it is, can help both of your nervous systems to just reset. And I feel like parents are always looking for things to do with their babies. So just go out for a walk. Don't worry about reading them the books and playing with all the toys. Just go outside for a walk. It will benefit both of you so much more than, trying to entertain them 24 hours a day and decrease your stress of having to figure out a new activity.
I know. Well, nature is the entertainer. Like it really is. Like anything nature, you can go to a park, or if you live close to the beach, anything like that. That's your nanny.
And actually, I think that nature and fresh air and going for a walk probably is very calming and soothing for those quote unquote fussy babies.
Yes.
So it's worth a try, especially when you've tried all the things and your baby is fed and they're not tired and all of the things. Like just go outside. I often do find that even just looking out the window can do wonders, or open the front door. It can do wonders. Yes. For those babies who are just so agitated for whatever reason it is. Amazing. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, we have the parent brain, and how are we doing, or maybe a better question is, how can we sort of nurture our parent brain while also doing all of that mothering and taking care of our babies and nurturing our babies' brains? Is there something different that we can do, or is it really because of that co-regulation that is then also nurturing our parent brain while nurturing our baby's brain? Are they just intertwined, or is there something that we can focus on to, I guess, positively support our changing parental brain?
Well, the one big way is like all the things we talk about. That is so important. And, things that bring us joy, right? If we can find, it really is like a time to look inwards. And, many of us maybe haven't found ourselves until like we are actually parents, and we start like looking at us and our needs. And it's a good time to explore our inner world, right? And so if we can discover what brings us joy, because then that will be transmitted, that feeling, to our babies. Like that's what's going to wire their brains too. So I'm not sure what else to say, but like I really think that like if we find that feeling, it is so good for our brains.
I think that focusing on the joy is a great strategy, because we get so caught up in the day-to-day doing of feeding the baby and changing the baby and entertaining the baby and trying to get them to sleep and, trying to get them to calm down and, trying to get all the laundry done and all the dishes done and everything else that we think that we have to do. And I think it is so easy to get so wrapped up in those day-to-day, I mean, not that they're minute, but some of them don't have to get done right away, like the laundry, like the dishes. Of course, you have to take care of your baby and meet their needs. But we get so caught up in all of that we forget to take care of ourselves, and we forget to do things that bring us joy, and we forget to regulate our own nervous systems the way that we did before having babies.
Yeah.
And before having babies, if you had a stressful day at work, or, you got in a fight with your partner or something, you had tools and things that you were doing to help you get out of that state. And I think we forget to do those things when we have a baby, because we feel like we don't have time, or we just like don't even think about it. Our brain is like not thinking about like, oh, I used to go to the gym to regulate myself, or I used to go out for a walk after dinner to regulate myself, or whatever it is that you need. And so finding that joy, and that joy does not have to cost any money. It doesn't have to take a lot of time. And I think that is so key. So really tuning into what brings you joy. And I think we don't really think about that when we have kids, because I know for me, I don't even know what I like to do anymore. Like, what did I do before kids? I was just thinking about, like, wow, if I went back to my life before kids, I would feel like I had so much time on my hands.
Right?
What would I do with that time?
What do we do before?
So, yeah, so that's a really, I love that strategy. And I invite all of the listeners to really think about that and find maybe a few things that bring you joy that you can kind of add in either to your day or even to your week. And they don't have to be getting a massage, it can be listening to your favorite song, it could be going to the beach and sitting and watching the water if that brings you joy, whatever it is. So I love that strategy. I think that's such an easy strategy that we don't do.
Yeah.
You could even find joy while you're folding the laundry. Listen to your favorite song while you're folding your laundry and let it bring a smile to your face. And I think this is part of why I ask the moms that I work with, especially in my mom and baby classes, I always start the class with a check-in, and I always talk about what is one wonder moment that you've had during this week. And it can be a wonder moment with your baby or with yourself. Really, it's just inviting them to think about a time during the week that brought a smile to their face. Was it hearing your baby giggle for the first time? Was it really having an intense kind of eye-to-eye connection with your baby? Maybe it was drinking your cup of coffee while it was hot.
Yes.
Right? That brings me a lot of joy when I have my last sip and it's still hot. And I think that it brings awareness to those small moments that we can focus on, because our brain really does tend to go to the negative.
Yeah.
And we kind of just skim over the good and the positive. And I think that's sometimes why we get so stressed and overwhelmed and just overloaded in this whole journey of motherhood, why we aren't confident because we're not trusting our instincts, because we think that the answers are somewhere else. And so I think that get back to finding something that brings you joy. I love it.
Yeah.
So good.
And also social connection, very important, which is part of joy. For me, that brings me joy when I talk to my friends.
Yeah, exactly. And social connection, I think as humans, we are designed for connection. And I think that the pandemic really showed us what happens when we don't have that connection. So finding that connection, and that connection doesn't have to necessarily be in person, it can be online. And that can still bring you the same joy and feelings of positivity and excitement, just as it would if you were giving somebody a hug in real life.
Yeah.
Yeah, love it. Okay, so we're going to move on to some rapid fire questions. So the first one is, what is your favorite way to prioritize taking care of yourself during the week?
I do reading talking about that. I'm very diligent about that. And if I have time, so that's like I always do. And if I have time at another time in the day, I do some movement. It could be yoga or well, yoga lately is what I've been doing more when it comes to movement. Yeah.
Love it. I love it. Yeah, I'm a big reader also, and I also love to move when I have time. But I do try to make sure that at least like 3 to 4 times a week, I am making time for movement, which is great.
Yeah. So important.
Can you tell us one unique thing about you, or
Well,
something fun that maybe not anybody knows about?
something, oh my goodness, unique. Well, maybe not that I'm left-handed, so I can never participate in brain studies because left-handed people are excluded.
What?
Yeah, because
I didn't know that.
yeah, because
Why?
there is a percentage of left-handed people that have the left hemisphere in the right, like the language center in the right hemisphere, and so you are out of the norm. So you are gonna scrabble the stats.
You're the outlier.
Yeah, exactly. You're not.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh wow, I did not know that. That's I like that. That is very unique actually. I love it. What is one piece of advice that you got in your first few years of motherhood that really stands out for you?
I actually didn't get any advice per se. I remember with my first newborn, I did find that he was feeding way too much, and I was like, "What is this? Why is he on the ball?" And my mom was like, that's normal. Like it's completely normal. And that's when I was like, okay, that's all she needed to say. Thank God she said
Nice.
it's normal,
Yes.
because otherwise then I will be all stressed out, right? So something
Hmm.
so simple as that's normal as like completely changing my experience.
If only all moms could hear that all day long, our world would be changed.
Yeah.
Oh, your baby only wants to be held? Don't worry, that's normal. Your baby wants to be on the boob all the time? Don't worry, that's normal. Your baby falls asleep at the breast? Don't worry, that's normal.
Right.
I love it. I love it. Okay. If you had a magic wand, what would you use it for and why?
Oh, for all parents just to be, whole, so they can give and nurture. That will solve. I really think it sounds exaggerated, but I do think, like, if we all just have the capacity to nurture how our species requires, there wouldn't even be wars. That's how I think.
Interesting. Yeah. I agree with that, actually. Nurture is so important. And I think it's also really important to remember that we have to nurture ourselves as parents. And we don't do that. We don't nurture the parents enough in our society. We focus so much on the baby, which is very important. But we also need to really focus on us
Yeah.
as parents and nurture our own brain. And this is something that over the years, when you start to become conscious of intentionally thinking about the thoughts that go on in your head, even just the thoughts, right? And that's a big part of it. But nurturing our thoughts, but also having our society be more supportive for parents in various different ways, I think is so important. And that really does come down to how our entire world treats each other as humans.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So let's end with, what is the biggest takeaway that you hope listeners have learned today?
I guess that your brain is unique, and this is an enormous opportunity in your life, for healing, for change, for love, like you never loved before. Like so many, it's like the time to save our life. And it's obviously there's challenges, right? But like to really experience life with all your heart.
I love that. And that brings me to the concept of being instead of doing
Yes,
all the time.
exactly. That's
And I love that. Savor life, savor your baby, savor the contact naps, savor the slowness
that's
of
exactly what I'm trying
life.
to convey, Kylie. Yes.
Oh, so amazing. I hope that all listeners are going to take that piece and just be like, you know what? Today I'm just going to be. I'm just going to get curious. I'm going to watch my baby and I'm just going to be. So tell us where listeners can learn more about you, and feel free to share any resources or links. And I'll post those under with the show notes as well. But let us know a little bit more about where people can find you and if you have anything special to offer for parents.
Yes, you can just go to my website that, Kylie is going to put the link below, www.newbornparents.net. You can follow me on Instagram, Rocio Zunini _newborn parents, but I know it's a mouthful, so just go to the link. And yeah, well, what do I have for parents? Well, I offer consults and stuff because, I also support with infant sleep, all aligned with parental brain science and brain development. So that's for that. And then I have also offers for professionals where you can learn about the parental brain. I have things coming in the future, but it's all still developing.
Amazing. Well, and Rocio also does lots of really amazing virtual summits. And so this is often a really easy way for parents to just learn from not only Rocio, but also from so many other professionals. And I think those are so needed. So thank you for organizing those and running those. And we're looking forward to the next one. Thank you so much for being here today. And it was a pleasure talking with you and learning more about the parental brain and all the ways that we really can support parents more with that parental brain. So I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us today on Mothering from Within. If today's chat sparked something inside of you to explore your motherhood journey deeper, the Mothering from Within Collective is waiting with open arms. This program offers an intimate, high-touch coaching journey designed to empower you with the confidence and clarity to embrace motherhood on your terms, free from guilt. Get curious about your parenting values, gain clarity on your baby's sleep, development, and more, with comprehensive courses, one-to-one support, group Q&As, and a nurturing community. This is your invitation to join a community of mamas doing it all their own way, supported, seen, and held. Visit the link in the show notes to learn more about the collective and how we can walk this beautiful path together. Until next time, stay curious, embrace clarity, and let your courage shine.